Hello again, friends. Tonight we're going downstairs, all the way downstairs, into an ancient underground city in the heart of Turkey that held as many as 20,000 people, 18 stories below the ground, and was built by people who never bothered to leave a name. Before we do anything else, before I even tell you to get comfortable, let's ask a few questions. Who digs an 18-story building downward and then leaves no record of who they were or why they did it? People nowadays carve their initials into park benches for far less. How do you keep 20,000 people breathing under a hillside with no machines, no electricity, and no windows? Why did the front door need to weigh as much as a small car? Who were they trying to keep out? Where do you put 1 million baskets of rubble so that nobody passing by ever suspects a thing? What were these people so afraid of that down felt safer than up? How does a town forget, for 40 years, that it is sitting on the largest underground city ever found? And, on a practical note, what exactly do you do with the cows? We'll get to all of it soon, including the cows. But before we set out, if these slow journeys through history help carry you off to sleep, take a moment now to subscribe to the channel. And we will be here to do this for you again, every single night. And if there's a place or a story you'd like to fall asleep to some night, leave it in the comments. Tonight's subject is an 18-story hole in the ground, so I can promise you no suggestion is too strange. While you're down there in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. No judgment if it's late. That's what this channel was made for. And tonight, staying up a little too late counts as research. Now, dim the lights, pull the blanket up, and tuck those feet in. Get low and comfortable. Tonight, low is the whole point. And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in Cappadocia, in central Anatolia, somewhere around the year 850. You have a wool cloak, a borrowed mule, a letter for a man in the next village, and a road that runs straight across a wide, dry plain under an enormous grey sky. The village is ahead of you. You can see its rooftops. What you cannot see, what nobody passing through here could see, is the other village, the one underground. Because by the time you ride in, calling your hellos, the streets will be empty, the doors will be shut, and an entire town will have vanished into the earth beneath your mule's feet, holding its breath, waiting politely for you to leave. Welcome to Derinkuyu. Try not to take the silence personally. Let's start the story where the modern world starts, with a man, a house, and a home improvement project that was about to become an archaeological mega-event. It's 1963 in the town of Derinkuyu, in the Turkish province of Nevşehir. A local man is renovating his home. We have no idea what his name was, and we never will, but he's still about to go down in history. I want to be honest with you up front, because that's how we do things here. No newspaper recorded him, no report names him, and every version of this story we have was written down decades later. The tour guides at the site will tell you a better version, that his chickens kept slipping through a crack in the cellar and not coming back, and the man, reasonably enough, went in searching for the lost chickens. It's a wonderful story. It is also, as far as anyone can trace it, just a story. guide law, polished by retelling, the way all good doorways into history get polished. What the sober version says is this: the man knocked through a wall, and behind the wall there was a room he had no record of in a house he thought he knew, and at the back of that room a passage, and the passage went down. Now the renovation itself was going about the same way all renovations go. Most home improvement surprises usually get chalked up to bad wiring and the previous owner's questionable decisions. In this case, the previous owner's questionable decision was a full-blown underground city. Behind the unknown man's wall was a tunnel. Beyond the tunnel were rooms. Below the rooms, even more tunnels. Stairs, shafts, halls, storerooms, descending level after level after level into the dark, further than a lamp could throw light, further than anyone was initially willing to go. The wall, for its part, had been holding this information since before the Ottoman Empire, and had apparently been waiting for someone to install a more modern floor plan before revealing its secrets. Within a few years, Turkey's Ministry of Culture had crews mapping it. By the end of the decade, visitors were climbing down into it. The records disagree on the exact year it opened, which feels right for a place this committed to secrecy. And what the mapping found was that the man's basement was not a basement at all. It was actually the attic of a city that went down a further 18 floors. Now, let's take the walk the first surveyors took and get our bearings, because the scale of this place is the first thing that's likely to blow your mind. Picture those first crews in the 60s, all carrying lamps, measuring tapes, a ball of string, and a completely inadequate sense of what they were walking into. Down the first set of stairs were rooms, reasonable enough. Down the second, halls, store chambers, a stable, less reasonable. Down the third, the fourth, the fifth, kitchens with black ceilings from ancient soot, a well shaft falling away past the lamplight, corridors running out in every direction like sentences with no end. Somewhere around the point where the surface noise stopped entirely, it would have dawned on each of them, personally and privately, that the word cave was no longer doing the necessary work. Caves happen naturally. Whatever this was not natural at all. Derinkuyu descends roughly 85 meters into the earth. That's around 280 feet. An 18-story building, upside down. If you stood it on the surface, it would be a respectable tower. But as we already know, they buried it. Spread through those levels were living chambers, kitchens, storerooms, stables, a winery, an oil press, communal dining halls, a school, chapels, wells, and something like 600 entrances, most of them hidden into the houses and courtyards of the town above. Not one grand gate. 600 quiet doors, cleverly disguised as somebody's cellar, somebody's stable corner, somebody's perfectly innocent storeroom floor. Every book and every article will tell you Derinkuyu could shelter 20,000 people, along with their livestock and their food. It's a famous number. It is also a number that nobody, and I mean nobody, has ever been able to trace to an actual study. No surveyor's calculation, no researcher's name attached. It's a figure that gets repeated because it keeps being repeated, which is the kind of thing that ought to make a careful person's eyebrow rise about half an inch. What we can say is that the rooms are real, the levels are real, the scale is genuinely enormous. And whether the true number was 20,000 or just 10, the achievement doesn't get less impressive. Today, only about a tenth of it is open to visitors. The rest is closed, unexcavated, unlit, or simply not safe to wander around in. Which means the most photographed underground city on Earth is still, mostly, a dark place where no one is allowed to go. To understand how any of this was possible, you have to go back, well before the diggers came along, to the actual landlords. There were three of them called Mount Erciyes, Mount Hassan, and Gölledağ. And if you're thinking those are odd names, it's because they are volcanoes. Millions of years ago, in eruption after eruption, they buried this corner of Anatolia under colossal blankets of hot ash. The ash settled, compacted, and hardened into a rock called tuff. And Cappadocian tuff is a peculiar, generous material. It's soft. Soft enough that a determined person with hand tools, a pick, a scraper, and a little bit of patience, can carve a room out of it the way you'd carve a very stubborn cheese. No iron machinery required. No engineering degree needed. Just time and a slightly delusional willingness to spend it on such a project. And then the rock does something almost courteous. Exposed to air, it hardens. The fresh-cut surface dries, the minerals knit together, and your soft, carvable cheese develops a crust, a tougher skin that holds its shape, which is why tunnels cut more than 1,000 years ago are still standing today without a single support beam. The rock heals around the wound you made in it, and then holds the shape of that wound forever, like the world's most cooperative scar. This is the same geology that built the famous fairy chimneys on the surface, those tall, impossible stone spires that make Cappadocia look like a planet doing an impression of a fever dream. Wind and rain sculpted the rock from above. People sculpted it from within. The volcanoes, having supplied the material, kept a respectful distance and took no further credit. Before we ask who did this, let's sit with the harder question for a minute. How does anyone do this? Because digging down is not like building up. Building up, your materials arrive and stay put. Digging down, every single basketful of what you remove has to travel the other way. Up the stairs you just carved, out a door you're trying to keep secret, to somewhere it won't be noticed. Carve an 18-story city, and you produce a mountain's worth of crumbled stone. And here's the lovely, maddening detail. Nobody has ever found the mountain. There's no great heap of soil squatting beside Derinkuyu announcing that something enormous happened here. Most likely it went onto the fields, a basket at a time, spread too thin for anyone to ever notice. That's just a guess though. No record actually survives. The builders even tidied up the evidence of building. The crime scene of the construction was cleaned before history arrived. Then there's the matter of planning. There were no blueprints, or at least none survived. And yet the shafts run true through 18 floors. The levels connect where they should. The air flows where it must. You cannot achieve that by enthusiasm alone. Somebody, many somebodies across generations, held the shape of this thing in their heads, in the dark, by lamplight, and handed that shape onto children who kept carving in the same directions. We don't know how they measured. We don't know how they kept the levels from wandering into each other. We know only that they didn't, for 85 vertical meters. There are modern basements with worse alignment, and those came with paperwork. And all of it was done by lamp, which, in a confined and barely ventilated working face, is its own quiet arithmetic. A flame eats the same air a digger does. They budgeted for oxygen the same way builders budget for timber. Patience, precision, and a suspicious knack for secrecy, all sustained across lifetimes. Hold that thought, because it's about to make the next question worse. So, who can we thank for breaking ground, literally, on what was to become such a great architectural achievement? And here the story splits into two questions. Who turned a hole in the ground into an 18-story city? That one we can actually answer, and we will in a minute. But who dug the first room? Who started all of it? That is the mystery. Here is the honest answer, and it is that nobody knows who the first diggers were. It's not that scholars are still debating the details. Genuinely, nobody knows who cut the first room at Derinkuyu or when. The version you'll read most often credits the Phrygians, an Iron Age Anatolian people, somewhere around the 8th or 7th century before Christ. It's a reasonable theory. It is also, when you chase it down, a theory resting on regional history and educated inference, not on an excavation report. No dated dig, no published stratigraphy. Some writers reach further back still, to the Hittites, around 1200 BC, under attack and digging in. Possible, argued by a few, proven by none. And Turkey's own Ministry of Culture, on its official page, skips both and traces the town's first inhabitants to Assyrian trading colonists, merchants from nearly 4,000 years ago. 3 official-sounding answers from 3 respectable directions, agreeing on almost nothing. There's even a celebrity witness who usually gets dragged into this. The Greek soldier historian Xenophon, writing around 400 BC, described Anatolian villagers living in houses dug underground. He said, "With a mouth like that of a well, but spacious below, with the livestock down there too, ladders for the people and tunnels for the animals." It's a marvelous passage, and it's real. I'll just note, because accuracy is the house rule. He wrote it about Armenia, a region away to the east. The oldest written description of underground living in Anatolia describes somewhere else. History does this to us constantly. So, whoever began building this underground city never took credit for it. No inscription, no founder's mark. Not even a, "Hey guys, check out this cool hole I'm digging over here." Every other wonder of the ancient world comes with a signature, because every other wonder was built to be seen. This one wasn't. Being known was the one thing this place could never afford. And so the first builders in the story signed nothing, told nobody, and left. So whoever began the digging is still a mystery. Although we may never know who cut the first room, we do know who cut the other 18 stories. And we know exactly why. From roughly the 7th century after Christ, Cappadocia became a frontier. The Byzantine Empire held Anatolia. The new Arab caliphates rode against it, and the wide land in between, farms, villages, monasteries, this plain, became the corridor the armies used. The raids began around 641, and then they kept coming, most summers, for the better part of 300 years. Read that again slowly. Not a war that happened to a generation, a war that happened to every generation, arriving with the warm weather, like the worst migratory bird imaginable. You couldn't fight a passing army. That was the emperor's job, and the emperor was in Constantinople, which had walls. You couldn't flee. The farm was the whole of what you had. So the people of this plain arrived at a third answer, the one that still stuns engineers today. If safety will not come from the sword or the road, dig. The expansion was the work of Byzantine Christian communities, level under level under level, across generations. Chapels appeared down there, Greek inscriptions, storerooms scaled for whole seasons. We picture ancient construction as kings pointing at things and slaves suffering. This was the opposite. Ordinary villagers deepening their own refuge, a basket of rubble at a time, fathers handing unfinished tunnels to sons the way other families hand down a trade. We baby-proof the staircase and call it preparedness. These people raid-proofed a county. So let's run the drill. Let's watch the vanishing act this whole machine existed to perform. The one you rode your mule into at the top of the hour. Picture this. A summer morning on the plain, looking very ordinary in every direction. Bread in the ovens, animals in the lanes, someone arguing with their neighbor about a fence. The immortal soundtrack of village life. Then, on the horizon, the thing every generation here learned to read before it learned letters. Dust. A column of it, billowing in a way that couldn't just be the wind and moving too fast to be blamed on a stampede of sheep. It was riders. Now, we don't have the drill manual. No pages survived telling us who moved first or who carried what. But the underground bunker itself was the emergency response plan, written in stone. 600 entrances, scattered through the houses, meaning nobody had far to run. Stables just under the surface, with wide passages, meaning the animals went down early and easily, not last and panicking. Provisions already below, grain, oil, water, wine, meaning the families fled with their hands free, or carrying only children. The architecture assumes a calm, practiced retreat. It was designed around people who had done this before and expected to do it again. The whole town drains downward, lane by lane, house by house, like water finding its level. Last of all, somewhere in a back chamber, the groan of andesite on tuff, as the stones roll across the throats of the city and seat themselves and stop. And then, the part I find genuinely eerie. The riders arrive, and there is nothing wrong with the village except that it's empty. Hearths warm, wells in the courtyards, not a soul, not even a single goat or chicken. Some of them must have known. By the 2nd century of this, surely the raiders knew about the holes. But knowing is not finding, and finding is not breaching. And a man who follows a tunnel mouth down into the dark meets a low passage, a blind turn, and half a ton of stone with a fist-sized hole in it, on the far side of which several thousand people are being very, very quiet. When your world fills with riders, every wall you can build above ground is an argument. Depth is the only answer that ends the conversation. Now to the detail everyone falls in love with, and rightly so: the doors. At choke points throughout the city, stairways, tunnel mouths, the necks between levels, the builders cut huge circular slabs of stone like millstones stood on edge, 1 meter to 1.5 meters across, several 100 kilograms each, the heaviest ones weighing closer to a furniture removal van rather than a door. They sat in carved slots beside the passage, and when trouble came, the defenders rolled them across the opening, where they settled into place, and the conversation with whoever was outside was abruptly over. And here's the elegant part. The doors could only be opened and closed from the inside. From the defender's side, handholds, leverage, room to work. From the attacker's side, a flat, round, faintly smug wall of stone with nothing to grip. The whole argument of the city condensed into a single object. We are not coming out, and you are not coming in. Better still, the builders carved the doors from andesite, a much harder volcanic rock than the soft tuff surrounding them on the walls, ceiling, and floors. They knew their materials well enough to make the wall yielding and the door unyielding, which is exactly backwards from every castle ever built. Each level could be sealed off on its own. Lose the first floor and the city didn't fall. It simply shrugged, rolled the next stone, and became 1 story smaller for a while. In the middle of most doors, there's a small round hole about the width of your fist, the observation port, a speaking tube, and, when required, something else. A Cambridge scholar named Dawkins, who walked these villages a century ago, collecting their dying Greek dialect, recorded a detail from the old stories. An arrow shot clean through the hole in one of those doors into the man on the other side. The hole was a courtesy with conditions. Here is the question that you should find the most puzzling while you lie there under your nice breathable blanket, 18 floors down, no windows, no machines. Why didn't everyone simply suffocate? Because the city breathed. It was built breathing. More than 50 ventilation shafts drop through Derinkuyu, straight, narrow chimneys, some running the full height of the city, top to bottom, like the building's own lungs. Warm, stale air rises and spills out. Cool air slides down to replace it, and the difference keeps a slow, continuous draft whispering through chambers 17 stories below the nearest blade of grass. No fans, no power, just physics, hired for free and never once late for work. The deepest shaft falls 55 meters and did double duty. Air above, water below, where it reached the water table and became the city's well. And the well held the city's quietest piece of genius. Its mouths opened on the lower levels, where the people were, and could be sealed off from above. A besieging army on the surface couldn't reach the water to poison it, couldn't drop anything down it, couldn't even reliably find it among fields and rooftops. The town's name, by the way, Derinkuyu, is Turkish for deep well. The secret was hiding in the name the entire time. Picture the besiegers' situation for a moment, because it deserves sympathy, almost. Your enemy has vanished into a hillside. Every door is a stone wheel you cannot move. Somewhere under your boots, thousands of people are drinking cool well water and breathing fresher air than your own camp. where the horses are thirsty and the summer is hot. You came to raid a village, and although you don't know it, the village is winning. So the doors are rolled shut, the lamps are lit. What is life actually like down there? First, the part I promised, the cows. The livestock lived on the topmost levels, just under the surface. And the reasons are so practical, you can hear the town elders chuckling at your bewilderment. Reason 1, smell, and everything the word implies in a sealed building. Keep the animals up where the vents are shortest, downwind of precisely nobody. Reason 2, and this is the one I find quietly beautiful, warmth. A floor of cattle and sheep up top made a layer of living insulation between the cold surface and the families below. The city wore its cows like a beanie in the winter. Below the animals, everything a paused world requires. A winery, proper carved pressing basins, because if you're sealing yourself into a hill for an unknown stretch of time, wine stops being a luxury and becomes a morale booster. An oil press for the lamps. Light down there was lamplight or nothing. Storerooms for grain. Communal kitchens. Shared hearths. Their smoke channeled up through the vents and bled out quietly above, so the hillside wouldn't stand there visibly exhaling soup fumes. Long refectory halls where, presumably, whole streets worth of neighbors ate together. A village dinner table, 80 feet down. As for the other end of the digestive question, since you were about to ask, the tour guides would tell you sealed clay jars, and the guides are probably right, and that's all I want to say about that. The temperature, year-round, sits near a constant 13 degrees or so. Cellar weather. Cool, never freezing, in a land where the surface does both extremes with enthusiasm. And the honest asterisk, because that's the house style. Nobody lived down there permanently. This was not a mole civilization. The town, it was called Malakopia then, lived in the sun, farmed, kept bees, argued about ordinary things. The city below was the held breath, not the life. When riders showed up on the horizon, the whole town poured downstairs, sealed the stones, and waited. For weeks, if they had to. The wine cellars say they were provisioned for months. How long was the longest stay? We don't know. There are no records, remember? What we do know is the design assumed patience, and the design was used for a very, very long time. Down at the bottom of the visitable city, past the kitchens, below the storerooms, on the deepest level tourists ever reach, there is a church. It's carved in the shape of a cross, not decorated with one, shaped like one. Two long, vaulted halls crossing each other, cut as a single piece out of the living rock, roughly 25 meters end to end. Nothing about it is accidental. Somebody planned a cathedral floor plan in absolute darkness at the bottom of an inverted 18-story building, and then removed every cubic inch of stone that wasn't church. Think about what it means that it's down there, the deepest point, the last refuge behind the last door, when everything above you has gone wrong. Raiders in the upper levels, stones rolled, the whole town sealed and silent in the dark. The place the builders prepared for you is a sanctuary. The bottom of their world was an altar. Whatever you believe, lying there in your bed tonight, there is something steadying in that. People under more pressure than we can readily imagine, deciding that the foundation stone of survival was hope and carving it accordingly. Higher up, on the second level, there's a long barrel-vaulted hall that the guides and Turkey's culture ministry call the missionary school, with little study rooms opening off it. Was it truly a school? The vault is real and rare. The label is tradition rather than proof, and I'll flag it as such. But it would fit. Sealed in a hill with your whole town and all of your children, you would want somewhere for the children to be. Possibly somewhere with a door you can close behind you. Some truths about parenting are constant across 12 centuries. Here's where I level with you about what the record holds and what it doesn't. We have the rooms. We don't have the voices. Nobody who sheltered in Derinkuyu wrote down what a night inside was like. Or if they did, it hasn't survived. History kept the architecture and lost the diary, which is history's most reliable habit. So everything tender you'll ever read about life down there, the murmur of prayers through tunnels, children learning to walk in lamplight, the particular sound of 1,000 families being quiet together. All of it is imagination, mine included. The honest inventory is smaller and stranger. We know the lamps existed because the niches and the oil presses survive. We know where people slept only roughly and not who slept where. No family's name attaches to any room. Were children born down there in the long stays? Almost certainly across centuries of use. And not one such birth is recorded anywhere. We know they were organized. A city this coherent doesn't happen to a mob, but no roster, no census, no record of a single individual among the thousands survives from below. Not one name in 12 centuries of use. A whole civilization's worth of patience, and the patience is the only signature they left. What you can do, tonight, in the dark, which is the correct laboratory for this, is the simple human arithmetic. Footsteps on stone, lamp shadow on a curved wall, the draft from a shaft you can hear but not see. Somewhere above, muffled beyond 18 meters of rock, weather. It would have been frightening at first, then ordinary. Humans can make anything ordinary. It's our most underrated talent. And then, eventually, it begins to feel safe. The dark that hides you stops being the dark you're afraid of. Now widen the picture, because Derinkuyu, impossibly, is not unique. It isn't even rare. Across this one Turkish region, more than 200 underground settlements have been found. 200, at least 2 levels deep, with around 40 going 3 levels or more. The plains are honeycombed, whole villages with second secret shelves. Derinkuyu is simply the deepest and grandest we've opened. The one that got famous because one wall in one house happened to come down in 1963. Statistically speaking, there are many more walls hiding secrets. 10 kilometers north sits Kaymaklı, another underground city, wider and shallower, opened to visitors a year before Derinkuyu was. Same period, same builder's logic, same stone doors. Sister cities in every sense. And here is where I owe you tonight's biggest act of honesty. Almost every article about Derinkuyu will tell you, somewhere around paragraph 4, that an 8 or 9 kilometer tunnel connects it to Kaymaklı, a buried road between buried cities. And it would be wonderful. It would also be, as far as the actual record goes, unverified. The claim circulates everywhere and is sourced almost nowhere. No survey maps it end to end. No one in the modern era has walked it. So the famous connection between the two cities remains, for now, a rumor 10 kilometers long. I'd argue the truth is better than the rumor. The rumor says someone dug a very long tunnel. The truth says we have explored these cities for 60 years and still cannot answer a yes or no question about where their passages go. A tenth of Derinkuyu is lit. The rest is the dark side of the moon, 10 minutes walk from a ticket booth. Here's the turn in the story almost nobody tells, because the buried city gets all the press. There were long stretches when the people of the village got to come above ground. Between the raiding centuries, the Byzantine Empire would push the frontier back and hold it, sometimes for generations at a time. And when the land was safe, the people of Cappadocia surfaced. The underground cities went quiet. The stone doors stood open and unneeded. Life moved back into the sun where it belonged. But here's what they did next, and I find it tells you everything about who these people had become. They kept carving. A people who had spent centuries learning to think with a chisel did not stop thinking with a chisel just because the emergency was over. They simply turned the skill toward the light. In the valleys at Göreme and Soğanlı, they cut churches into the cliff faces and the fairy chimneys. Hundreds of them, hollowed out of the same volcanic tuff, with columns and domes and arches, all of it carved rather than built. And this time, with no raiders to hide from, they decorated. Frescoes in blues and golds and reds, saints and angels across carved ceilings, color blooming on rock in broad daylight. Look at the two halves of it together. Underground, bare walls, no inscriptions, no names. Invisibility as a survival strategy. Above ground, in peacetime. Painted ceilings you can see across a valley. Same people, same rock, same handwriting, signed and unsigned. The underground city is what their skill looked like when they were afraid. The painted churches are what it looked like the moment they no longer had to be. If you want to know what those anonymous diggers would have made, given peace and permission, it's standing in the Göreme Valley right now, wearing 800 years of pigment. And whenever the dust rose on the horizon again, and across those centuries, it always eventually rose, they put down the paintbrush, picked the children up, and went back downstairs. Both cities, the bright one and the dark one, stayed ready. That was the actual masterpiece. Not either city, but the people who could live in both. The Arab raids that built the deep city eventually ended, the way all weather ends. The frontier moved. The stones stayed. And then history kept arriving, and the town kept going downstairs. When the armies of Timur, Tamerlane, tore through Anatolia around the year 1400, the old chronicles and the village memory agree. The Christians of Cappadocia went underground again, into refuges their ancestors had cut 6 centuries earlier, and the doors still rolled, and the wells still drew. Try to name another piece of infrastructure that worked perfectly 600 years after installation. The vents did not need updating. The stone did not need a subscription. Under the Ottomans, the centuries mostly quieted, but the habit never quite died. the Greek-speaking villagers of Malakopea, descendants in language and faith of the people who dug, kept the lowest habit of their ancestors. When trouble came, you knew where the stairs were. They had a word for the underground places, Cappadocia, refuges, not a monument word, a word you keep in the kitchen drawer in case. It lasted until 1923. After the war between Greece and Turkey, the two countries agreed to exchange their minority populations. A line in a treaty, and suddenly whole worlds were folded up like tents. The Greek Christians of Malakopea, the last community that still carried the living memory of what lay beneath their floors and what it was for, packed what could be packed and left for a country many of them had never seen. The doors of their houses closed. The doors under their houses had already been closed a long time. Memory, it turns out, is the one thing you can't store in a cellar. Grain keeps. Wine keeps. The knowledge of what the doors were for went where the people went, onto the ships in 1923. Now, before we get to the forgetting history part, and the forgetting history part is coming, I want to show you the strangest footnote in this whole affair. Because the knowledge didn't vanish all at once. Before the last people who carried it left, a stranger with a notebook wrote it down, in English, through a university press. And then it sat on library shelves and for 47 years, while the world forgot the thing it said. Between 1909 and 1911, that Cambridge scholar I mentioned, Dawkins, the one with the arrow story, travelled village to village through Cappadocia. He wasn't hunting cities, he was hunting words. The Greek spoken in these valleys was ancient, isolated, and dying, and he wanted it on paper before it went. So he sat with the villagers of these towns, Malakopea among them, and wrote down their language, and along with the language, inevitably, came the life, including the fact, which he recorded and published in 1916, that the Greek villagers of this region kept underground refuges, the Cappadocia, and had sheltered in them from trouble within living memory. Now line the dates up, because this is the part I genuinely cannot get over. 1916. The underground refuges of Cappadocia are described in print in a Cambridge University press book that any library could order. 1923. The villagers leave and the living memory goes with them. 1963. A man knocks down his cellar wall in Derinkuyu and the world is astonished. Surveys, ministries, headlines astonished by a discovery that had been available in English in university libraries the whole time. Nobody had cross-referenced the footnote with the floor plan. In fairness to everyone involved, check whether the linguistics monograph mentions our basement has never appeared on any renovation checklist, which tells you something useful about how things actually get lost. Almost never, because nobody wrote them down. Somebody nearly always writes them down. They get lost because the man holding the hammer and the man holding the book never meet. Somewhere in tonight's world, presumably, the next Derinkuyu is already written down, fully documented, correctly filed, in a book nobody has thought to cross-reference yet. Sleep on that one. So here is the fact I find more remarkable than the depth, the doors, or the well. The fact this whole episode has secretly been about. For roughly 40 years, the town of Derinkuyu, the new town, the families who settled there after the exchange, lived an ordinary Anatolian life directly on top of the largest known underground city on Earth and didn't even know it. They weren't fools. Never think that. They knew their cellars were old and odd. They kept onions in carved rooms, stabled animals in others, felt the strange, cool draft from cracks at the back, and reasonably assumed what anyone would. Old caves. Every old town has old holes. Nobody looks at the back of their own cellar and thinks, could this be the entrance to an ancient, forgotten underground civilization? The surface of the deep city simply went on working. As storage, as it had always partly been, while the 17 floors beneath it slipped out of human knowledge entirely. The city was so good at hiding that, with its keepers gone, it hid from everyone, indefinitely, without effort. A city built to vanish, and for those 40 years, for the first time in its 12th-century career, it finally, completely had. And then a man took a hammer to a wall, and the world's most patient secret met the world's most universal activity, renovating. The plains had kept the city the way old men keep grudges, completely and without visible strain, and gave it up to a home improvement project on an otherwise unremarkable afternoon. Since then, surveys, tourists, a place on the UNESCO World Heritage List alongside the fairy chimneys above it. 90% of it remains unlit and unvisited. Whatever else is down there is exactly where it's been all along. One more thing before we put the lamp out. Because if any part of you is hoping this story isn't over, I have good news. The plane isn't done. In 2013, in the city of Nevşehir, the provincial capital, half an hour up the road, municipal crews were demolishing old housing around the hilltop castle to make way for new construction. The bulldozers broke through into tunnels. The tunnels led to rooms. The rooms kept going. Archaeologists were called in, and by 2014 they were saying carefully, in the way of people trying not to get ahead of themselves, that the city under Nevşehir might be bigger than Derinkuyu. Bigger, if you can believe it, found the same way, by accident, from above, by people who were trying to do something else entirely. Twice now, in living memory, Cappadocia has produced an entire lost city because somebody disturbed the ground at the right spot. 200 underground settlements confirmed, and the true count? Well, nobody will commit to a true count. Every old town on this plain sits on old rooms. Every old cellar has a back wall. And the region has a now established habit of keeping 18-story secrets through sheer geological calm. Somewhere out there tonight, on that plain, is a wall with a city behind it that nobody has asked about yet. The discovery scoreboard so far reads, found by renovation, 1. Found by demolition, 1. Found by deliberately looking, 0. The next lost city in Cappadocia is, in all likelihood, currently moonlighting as the back of somebody's cellar. So here you are. You made it down all 18 stories, and the lamp's burning low, which is as it should be. Every monument in history was built to be seen. The pyramids advertise. the Colosseums announce. Every palace ever raised is a sentence that begins with, "Look at me." And we duly looked and wrote down the kings' names and called it history. Derinkuyu is the opposite object, the only kind of wonder that succeeds by being unseen. Its builder's victory condition was your ignorance. By that measure, it may be the most successful structure on Earth. It worked so well we lost it. It hid so well it outlived the very memory that it was hiding. Spare a quiet thought, then, for the people history kept no names for. The first digger, whoever they were, scraping at soft ash rock with a hand tool and a notion. The Byzantine farmers who spent their winters deepening a hole they prayed they'd never need, and needed, and survived because of. The mothers counting children by lamplight while cavalry crossed overhead like weather. The last Greek grandmother of Malacopea on a ship in 1923, carrying the knowledge of the stairs in a language the town would eventually stop speaking. Not one of their names survives. Everything else they were, the patience, the stubbornness, the refusal to be erased, is still standing, 85 meters of it, and now you know it's there. They never wanted to be remembered. They wanted to be safe, and remembered was the price they paid for it 12 centuries late. I think they'd take the deal again. And you, there in your bed, you're on the surface, where it's quiet. No riders on your horizon. Your doors are lighter than half a ton and lock all the same. The only thing under your floor is floor. You are, by the standards of everyone in tonight's story, almost unimaginably safe. Safe enough to spend an hour underground for fun and fall asleep there. So, let the lamp go out. The stone doors are rolled shut. The well is cool and deep, and the air is still drifting down the shafts and through the dark rooms, the way it has for 1,000 years, whether or not anyone remembers. And tonight, somebody remembers. Sleep well. You made it through. Tonight, we travel back more than 2,000 years to a city beside the sea in the warm south of the world, and to a quiet dream that once gathered there. The dream of holding, in one place, everything that anyone had ever thought to write down. His name we will come to. The city's name was Alexandria, and the dream was a library. There is no need to remember any of this. No need to hold on to the names, or the dates, or the places. You can simply listen and let the night grow quiet around you. Let your shoulders soften. Let the bed take your weight. There is nowhere you need to be, and nothing you need to do. Only this quiet room and a slow story, and the long, easy road into sleep. So, more than 2,300 years ago, on the northern edge of Egypt, where the land meets the wide blue Mediterranean, there was a young city. It was new, as cities go. It had been founded only a generation or two before, and named after the conqueror who had marked out its streets and then ridden away east, never to see it finished. Alexandria. It was a Greek city, set down on the Egyptian shore. Its people spoke Greek in the markets and the courtyards. Its kings were a Greek family, the Ptolemies, who had come to rule Egypt after the conqueror died, and who wore the old crowns of the pharaohs while building something entirely their own. And it was a city that faced the water. Picture the harbor, if you like, but gently. There is no need to hold the picture tightly. Just let it rise on its own, the way images do as you drift towards sleep, and let it drift away again just as easily. A great curved harbor, full of ships, sails the color of old cloth, the masts swaying, slow, against a sky going gold toward evening. And out at the harbor's mouth, on a small island, a tower of pale stone rising higher than anything around it, with a fire kept burning at its top through the night to guide the ships safely home. A lighthouse, one of the wonders of that old world. But we are not going to the lighthouse tonight. We are going inland, just a little, away from the docks, into the quiet quarter of the city where the palaces stood. Because there, among the gardens and the colonnades, the kings of Alexandria had built something the world had never quite seen before. They called it the Mauseon, a house of the muses. The word, softened by all the centuries since, has come down to us as a word you know, museum. But it was not a museum as we think of one now. It was something more like a home for scholars, a place where learned men and women could live and eat and walk and think and want for nothing, so that they might give all their hours to study. And gathered within it, or beside it, was the library. Let that word settle for a moment. A library. We are so used to them now that the wonder has worn smooth. But try to feel it as it was then, in a world where every single book had to be written out by hand, letter by letter, by a person sitting patiently with a reed pen. A world with no printing, no copies made by machine, where a single fire in a single house might erase a poem forever, and no one would ever read it again. In that world, someone had the idea to gather it all. Not some of it, all of it. Every book, every poem, every play, every treatise on the stars and the body and the laws of distant lands. To bring it all to one place beside the sea and keep it safe and let anyone who wished come and read. It was the first king, Ptolemy, who is said to have dreamed it, and his son, the second Ptolemy, who truly built it and began to fill its shelves. There was a learned man from Athens named Demetrius, who is remembered as one of the first to whisper the idea into a king's ear and to begin gathering the earliest books. The stories there are tangled, and the years are uncertain, and you do not need to keep any of it. Let the names wash past you like water. They only need to be soft sounds in a quiet room. What matters is the dream itself, to hold the whole mind of the world in one quiet building, and the long, patient, gentle work of trying. You may be settling now. Good. That is exactly right. So let us walk inside slowly, the way you might in a dream, and see what it was like. Though here, I must be honest with you, in the soft way one can be honest at night. We do not truly know what it looked like. No one wrote down its plan. No drawing of it survives. It was so much a part of daily life that no one thought to describe the rooms the way you have never once described the hallway of your own home to anyone. So what we have is only fragments, a few lines written by travelers remembering. So picture it gently and know that we are dreaming a little together. A long covered walk lined with columns where scholars paced slowly back and forth as they thought, sheltered from the midday sun. Open gardens, green and watered, with paths to wander. A great round hall with a high-domed ceiling where all the scholars ate together at a single long table, sharing their meals and their arguments and their discoveries, night after night. Quiet rooms for reading, lecture halls where the old taught the young, and the shelves, rows and rows of them in their cool, dim halls. But not shelves of books as you would know them, with spines and covers standing upright. These were scrolls, long sheets of papyrus, the reed paper of Egypt, rolled carefully around a rod and laid on their sides in pigeonholes, like bottles in a rack. From the end of each scroll hung a small tag, a little label, so a reader might find the one they wanted without unrolling 100 others. Tens of thousands of them. Some of the old writers, carried away, said hundreds of thousands. We will never know the true number, and it does not matter tonight. Enough that there were more than any one person could read in a lifetime. More than most people in that world could even imagine in one place. And above the shelves, the story goes, there was an inscription. A few words carved where the readers would see them. The place, it said, of the cure of the soul. The cure of the soul. Imagine walking in beneath those words, in the cool and the quiet, into all that gathered thought. Lamplight, soft and golden, on the rolled papyrus. The faint, dry smell of reed and ink, and the silence of a place where 1,000 voices waited patiently to be unrolled and heard again. Let yourself rest there a moment in the warm lamplight among the scrolls. There is nowhere you need to be. Now, a library so vast did not fill itself, and the way the kings of Alexandria gathered all those books is one of the gentle wonders of the story. For one thing, they hunted them. They sent people out across the known world to the markets of distant cities with money and with patience to buy up scrolls wherever they could be found and carry them home. And for another, they simply took them, gently but firmly. There was a law, the old accounts say, about the ships. Every vessel that sailed into the great harbour of Alexandria, from anywhere at all, was searched, not for treasure or for goods to tax, for books. Any scroll found aboard was carried up to the library. There, the patient scribes would copy it out, word for word, by hand. And then the copy was returned to the traveller, and the original was kept for the shelves. There was even a name for books gathered this way. They were called simply the books from the ships. And there is one story told of the third of the Ptolemy kings that I have always found quietly delightful. It may not be true in every detail, but it is true enough to the spirit of the place. Far away, in Athens, were kept the official scripts of the great old tragedies, the plays of the masters, written down and guarded as a treasure of the city. The king in Alexandria wished to copy them for his library, so he asked to borrow them. And the Athenians, wary, agreed only if he left an enormous sum of silver as a deposit, a promise that he would send the precious originals safely home. He paid the silver. He took the plays. He had them copied with great care onto the finest papyrus. And then he sent Athens the copies and kept the originals for his shelves, and told the Athenians, with a shrug one can almost see across the centuries, that they were welcome to keep the silver. He wanted the books more than the fortune. That was the kind of place it was. You do not need to follow all of that. Let it go. The night is wide, and there is time. But the books were only the beginning, because the true treasure of Alexandria was not the scrolls. It was the people who came to read them. For the kings did something clever and generous. They paid for the scholars to come. They offered them a home and meals and freedom from worry, and asked in return only that they think and study and add to the great gathering of knowledge. And so, from all around the sea, the brilliant and the curious came to live in that quiet quarter and walk in those gardens and eat at that long table and read by that golden light. And the things they worked out there, in the calm of it, still echo. There was a man named Eratosthenes, who for a time kept the library, who looked after all those scrolls, and he did something so simple and so vast that it still stops the breath a little. He had heard that in a city far to the south, on a certain day of the year, at noon, the sun stood directly overhead, and a stick set in the ground cast no shadow at all. And he noticed that on that same day, at that same hour, in Alexandria, a stick did cast a shadow, a short and certain one. And from that, from only that, from two sticks and two shadows, and the distance between two cities, and a quiet afternoon of careful thought, he worked out the size of the whole earth, the distance all the way around the world. And he came astonishingly close to the true figure, sitting there in a library by the sea more than 2,000 years ago, with no ship that could have carried him round to check. Let that drift through you softly. A man measuring the whole round earth with a stick and a shadow and a patient mind. There were others. A scholar named Callimachus, who took on a task almost unimaginable, to make a catalogue of everything in the library, a list of all the works and who had written them and where to find them on the shelves. It filled, they say, 120 scrolls all by itself. The first great catalogue in the world, the patient grandfather of every library card and every search you have ever typed. And around them, countless others whose names are mostly lost now. People bent over scrolls in the lamplight, working out the movements of the stars, the words of old poems, the workings of the body, the shapes of numbers. A whole quiet community of minds gathered in one place for the simple love of knowing. For a long time, it went on, generation after generation. The ships came in and gave up their books. The scribes copied. The scholars walked in the gardens and argued at the long table, and slept and woke and worked again. The shelves grew heavier with all the gathered thought of the world. And you might think, after such a beginning, that the story ends with a great and terrible night. A single fire, perhaps, that swallowed it all at once. That is the way the tale is often told. But that is not, it seems, what really happened. And the truth is quieter and sadder, and somehow gentler than the legend. There was no single ending. The library did not fall in a night. It faded, slowly, over hundreds of years. There was a fire, once, it is true. Long after the great age of its founding, a war came to Alexandria, and a famous general set the ships in the harbour alight, and the flames spread to the dockside, and some number of scrolls were lost. But the library lived on after that. Scholars still came. Books were still copied. It was a wound, not a death. What truly took it was time and neglect and the slow turning of the world. Kings who cared less, money that stopped coming, the scholars drifting away to other cities, wars that swept through the quarter where it stood and damaged the old halls and were not repaired. Each century a little dimmer than the last, the lamplight burning a little lower. There was, much later, a smaller library, a daughter of the first, kept in a great temple elsewhere in the city. And when that temple at last came down, in an age of changing faiths, the old accounts that describe its fall do not even mention any books. By then, it seems, the shelves there may already have stood empty. The scrolls already scattered, or crumbled, or carried away. No one quite remembers when. That is how it really goes, more often than not. Not with a great roar, but with a long, soft quiet. A place beloved, and then simply, slowly, let go. There is no need to feel the loss too sharply tonight. Let it be a gentle sadness, the kind that softens you rather than wakes you, the kind you can fall asleep inside of. Because here is the thing about that vanished library. It did not entirely vanish. All those years of copying, all those scribes patiently writing out the books from the ships and the borrowed plays and the works of the scholars. The copies went out into the world. They traveled on other ships, to other cities, into other libraries and other hands. And some of them survived, carried forward, copied again and again, across all the long centuries between that golden harbour and this quiet room. Words first gathered in Alexandria are still read today. Ideas first written down by lamplight on those shelves are still alive, still moving from mind to mind. The man who measured the earth with a shadow, the poets whose plays were worth more than silver. They reached us. They are here, faintly, even now, in the quiet of tonight. And the dream itself never really died. The dream of gathering it all, of keeping it safe, of letting anyone who wishes come and read. Every library since has been, in its way, a child of that first one by the sea. The cure of the soul, offered again and again, in city after city, down all the years. So we need not mourn it too much, a thing so loved, that gave so much, and scattered its gifts so widely that we are still opening them. That is not so sad an ending after all. That is a kind of immortality, quiet and partial and real. But tonight, we do not need to follow it all the way down the centuries. Tonight, we can leave it where it was happiest, in its golden age, in the warm lamplight beside the sea. So let us go back there, one last time, as you drift off, to that cool, quiet hall more than 2,000 years ago. The scrolls resting in their pigeonholes, their little tags hanging still. The last scholars walking slowly home through the gardens in the dark. The long table cleared, the lamps burning low. Outside, the harbour is calm. The ships rock gently at their moorings. Far out on its little island, the great lighthouse keeps its slow fire against the night, throwing its long soft light across the water again and again and again. And inside, all that gathered thought rests in the dark, safe for tonight, waiting patiently, the way it always waited, for the morning and the next quiet reader and the next. There is nowhere any of it needs to be, and there is nowhere you need to be either. So let the harbour grow dim. Let the lamplight grow small and smaller, a few warm points of gold in the gathering dark. Let the long light of the lighthouse sweep past, slower now and slower, until you can no longer quite tell it from the soft turning of your own thoughts and your own slow breathing and the quiet dark all around you. The city is sleeping. The sea is calm. The night is deep and warm and safe. And you can let yourself go now, slowly, gently, with nothing left to do and nowhere left to be. All the way down, past the lamplight, past the quiet shelves, past the edge of the warm dark. All the way down into a long and deep and peaceful sleep. Rest now. Good night.